What are the pros and cons of studying MBA in India versus MBA abroad?
Everybody will have a different situation, but I can probably tell them that how I navigated, how I looked into it. I would generally tell people that not to look outside for an answer. The answer lies within. So you have to ask within yourself that what are the pros and cons of both. You have to realize what are your priorities, and there are a couple of metrics I'll also tell people to analyze things on. You have to firstly look at the cost of education, and from the cost of education, not necessarily weighing it in how costly it is, but also weighing it how feasible it is for you. Because you have to also be aware of the macroeconomic situations across the world, not necessarily in India. I know a lot of folks who end up going to the US would not necessarily have the required funds, but would take that plunge and go, which is great. But if things go south, then what? Are you that risk taker who can take it up? If you're not that risk taker, then is there a similar option which costs you less, which is less risky, gives you same opportunities, and you can do the same studies? Then the second thing you have to look at is, what is my long-term vision? Do I want to be back in India? Do I want to be outside? And have a very realistic sense of it. I talk to a lot of people. No, I want the experience of a US school or a Europe school. I'll come back to India. Now you realize the economics of the game. A degree in the US, let's say an MBA would cost you, let's say, a few $1,000s. Right? Let's say a top HSW MBA would cost, let's say, 2 CR or roughly in that range. Somebody who does not have funds, right, and has taken, let's say, a loan. Somebody has taken a 2 CR loan. The US government was kind enough to give that person a 2 CR loan. Now you realize that, boss, that education loan was on, let's say, a 12% interest rate, which clearly means that 1% is something which you end up paying only as interest per month, which clearly means that 2 lakh rupees is the interest which you have to pay per month, which will also compound. Now just imagine, if you were in the US, it's fine, right? 1 year you'll get an OTP, it's absolutely fine that you'll do the job. But you also understand the visa constraints, that you would be dependent on the visa. You'll get a visa, you're a great student, pretty competitive, I've done, good stuff in life. But what if not? Now that thing happens, you have to also realize that, boss, am I that risk taker who can figure things out? If not, at least you have to be aware of the fact that somebody had told me that, this can happen. This economics game, that probably 2 lakhs as only interest is something which I have to pay, can happen. And this is very realistic. Now imagine you came back to India and you have to pay 2 lakh rupees only as interest, which clearly means that you would have to earn 3 lakh rupees pre-tax to pay that 2 lakh rupees, because you will end up paying it after tax. 3 lakh rupees is something which you have to earn per month only to pay interest. Now, a lot of people say that, boss, that's daunting, right? I mean, that's a little scary. But it's not about being scary. I mean, that is the reality. You can reduce this. You can reduce the total loan. You can reduce, let's say, the interest rate. All of things are fine. All I'm trying to say that answer has to come within. That whether I'm that risk taker, whether my long-term goals are to be back in India or be in the US. Be in the US, then you have to also understand what are the macroeconomic conditions, how are the visa situations, all of those things. And not necessarily look at the education from a short-term perspective is the last thing which I'll say. If you are that guy who can get an admission to a Harvard, a Stanford, a Wharton, or those schools which have global names, a very important thing for people to also understand is that there are very few schools outside of India which have global names. Let's say even the top schools in India, MBA schools in India, would have a good name outside, but it would be majorly limited to the geography they are based out of. APAC, India, right? A Harvard or a Stanford or Wharton would generally have a global name. Are you that guy who's competitive enough to firstly make it? Is the first thing. Do you have that profile? Do you have that grades, right? So I would say that that's how I thought about it. That was my long-term goal, was to be in India. Very, very clear. Then going outside of, I had a 761 GMAT. I was from a decent school. The VP I was working was a MIT grad. The CEO I was working was on the board of admissions for Harvard. All of them told me, right? But I was pretty clear that, boss, I want to be back in India. Then those options of being outside clearly goes away. to be back in India, which is probably I want to be in India. And the reason I did an MBA in India was because if I do an MBA in India, that's only when I can build a network in India. I've done an MBA in New York. I've done an MBA in, let's say, London. I come back to Gurgaon. I don't have a network, right? I mean, so a lot of those practical things are also to be considered. And those things will come from within, not generally from outside. Ask yourself that, boss, what are my priorities? And then what is the best education which fits in it? Don't try to change yourself as per that education.